I love it. Coach Petersen here with us. Damon's in for Salk, is Brock and Salk here in the Seattle Sports Station. I started the show with this question, Chris, to Damon, and he was around the team. He was calling the games at that time in 2016, right? He still has. 17 years. Is it 17 or so, Damon, that you've been working there in many different capacities after playing there? Something like that,
something crazy like that.
I asked him how much different this trip to the Sugar Bowl feels right now, facing this Texas team, than it did in 2016, Chris, where you were leading your Husky team down to the Peach Bowl to play Saban in Alabama. How would you compare and contrast 16 and all that went into it as you were leading it to what you're watching now with this team heading down to the Sugar Bowl?
That's a good question. It feels different to me because I'm a fan now, and fans always believe in their team, and they always think it doesn't matter, we're going to figure out a way. When you're coaching, you have a tendency to think about all your problems. You know all your warts, all the issues you have. So obviously it felt a lot different. But I do think in general, this whole playoff, this 14 playoff feels way different this year than it has certainly in 16 to me, or any of the years leading up to this, where any one of these teams really could win it depending on who's hot these next two games. That's what I really think. That's what makes it so fun. The committee, very interesting because there is no question they did a fabulous job getting these matchups. Everybody is going to be on the edge of their seats watching these. But they also got it completely wrong leaving Florida State out, in my opinion. That was just flat out wrong. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. That was a no-win situation. But it's going to be awesome to watch because you really could probably make a case for each team to win this thing. I think it's, I always been talking about November football. To me, the game just changes. The teams changes. That's where the goods start to separate themselves from everybody else. And the kind of good averages, they kind of take a step back. And so you saw that in November, and now this is a whole nother round of, January football. I think it's just different, and whoever gets hot, like TCU got hot for that one game against Michigan last year, but you really felt like a better team than Michigan, but they got it done.
Yeah. Hey, Coach, these bowl games, they're always a time of celebration. You've worked hard all year to get to it, whether it was, the Las Vegas Bowls, Rose Bowl, all these things. But did you think it was different in preparation? Could you celebrate and have as much fun at a CFP compared to going to the Fiesta Bowl that maybe it's the last game? Talk about the differences in preparation for a CFP matchup and maybe, going to the Fiesta Bowl to play the Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think it's still really the same. It's just all focused on this one game.
Yeah.
Now, behind the scenes, you're going to have a lot of your, analysts and those type of things setting things up for that next game, analyzing, those two teams so you're not behind the eight ball and starting from scratch if you win that game. But in terms of players, it is all about this one game. It is all in on this one game. And then we get this done, we'll come up for air, regroup, and go for game two.
Yeah. Chris Petersen here with us. One thing that jumped out to me, Chris, I watched the Alamo Bowl on the coaches tape the other day, just kind of wanting to see from last season, the Texas-Washington matchup down there in San Antonio. One thing that jumped out to me, it struck me with both teams, was conditioning. It just looked like after a month of a layoff or darn near close to it, and just the football legs that you saw in November that you referenced there, and in the Pac-12 title game with Oregon, those guys are just, they're conditioned, they're football conditioned. And then you take a month away from that football conditioning and get back to playing a game. I thought both teams last year got a little bit gassed in the dome down there in the Alamo Bowl. How do you ready your team? If you're Kalen DeBoer and you're getting them football ready, football conditioning ready to make sure they can play in a dome against a team physically so similar to you.
Yeah. You definitely take a step backwards with this huge layoff. There's not a perfect way to do this, just the way the Bulls and these big-time bowl games playoffs have been set up, where you basically have almost a month off before you play. That's not ideal. You know, that's like going into fall camp. And when you come out of fall camp and you play your first game, you're not truly football ready to go because you haven't done anything like that in a whole year. Like, you can't get game ready truly just by practicing. You know, it's just different than basketball or baseball. You have to tackle, you have to run, you have to be physical. It has to be live. And there's no way you're going to do that continually in a practice, whether it's fall camp or prepping for a bowl game. So you do take a step back. You know, we've always kind of made the assertion that it's like, this is kind of like a game one mentality again, where there's a couple weird things that will show up. You know, turnovers usually really start to show up again in these late bowl games because the backs aren't used to being hit for like they had been for a whole month. So you lose that. The special teams is a little bit different because that's really, you don't practice that stuff live in full speed in practice at this time of year. So heavy on the legs. And then, you know, that's a high impact collision situation, special teams. So you kind of back off those. And, you know, and then certainly the tackling part of things. You're going to do your tackling where you tackle bags and you're tackling in close quarters, but the open field tackling live and just playing real football, you don't do a bunch of that. So you do lose some rhythm and you got to play yourself into it. I don't worry tremendously about the conditioning part. There will be a little bit of setback, but I worry more about just the real rhythm of the game of tackling, turnovers, and special teams. That's the thing that always kind of stood out to me.
He is Chris Petersen. You know that voice, longtime Husky coach, Boise State coach, I think a Hall of Fame coach. We'll see when that happens. Damon and I are going to get that sucker
For
going.
sure.
How much different, and not even a mentality, Damon asked you about the mentality. If I were to look, Chris, at your practice routines, if I were to look at your schedule from maybe your first Fiesta Bowl to your last one, to maybe the college football playoff in 2016, the routine change at all? Did the contact, everything you just talked about, the tackling, the practice schedule, any of that get tweaked over all of your years of playing in these big stages?
You know, when I think about that, and I haven't thought about it for a while, but when I think back and analyzing it, I think probably did not do as good a job later in my career as earlier, because I think I got scared of getting guys hurt. And when you worry too much about that, hurt in practice, and, you know, coaches are always very mindful of that, but you've been through a long, tough season, especially as many games as the Huskies have played right now. And so you're really trying to recover some of these guys. So it's that balance of how do we get these guys healthy, but yet we still have to go get back. We still have to, like, not take a step back. We'd still like to improve. And I think later in my career, probably got too scared and backed off too much than I did early on. Early on, it's like, I don't care. We're going. We are going to get back. We're going. And I think that helped.
That's how we were coached back in the day. Right.
You know, it's like, you know, we're going to coach, you know, we're going to treat them like dogs and we're going to coach them hard and let's go. I don't care if your hamstring hurts. Go. But that's probably, I mean, as weird as that sounds, it's really a almost counterintuitive thought. Because, again, from the outside, the fans, you guys know, but the fans don't know how beat up these teams are. And, you know, so much of these teams that are playing now, one, have had a really good fortune of keeping both those guys relatively healthy. Their star players relatively healthy, but there has to be some pretty good depth to get to this point in their to be playing in games like this. Because it's just such a, you know, it's a tough, brutal game. It just is. You're going to lose guys, and you know, you hate losing them in practice. I mean, that's the thing that just, but you have to practice, or you're going to lose anyways. And when I say practice, I mean really practice. Go hard.
Sure. All right, Coach, changing ships on you here. The the state of college football. We could talk about this for hours, but Brock and I both agreed that a commissioner is needed, and we believe that Chris Petersen is the man for that job when it's all said and done. But, here's this yesterday. It was a monumental day forever in college football. You can remember all those wonderful times we had with National Signing Day and the parties and all the crazy Husky fans who love recruiting and let's put on the highlight tape, this, that, and the other. Can you believe how on the back burner this thing has become because of the transfer portal, NIL, everything else, the bowl season? What are we doing in a perfect world? Chris Petersen, commissioner, when's signing day? And how do we get this right?
First of all, let me just say for this commissioner thing, so it's not going to be me.
Come on, save the day.
Whoever is this commissioner, this one person is not going to be able to solve these issues. Yeah. This one person, because I do think there probably needs to be some sort of commissioner, but this commissioner needs to get a bunch of really smart people around them. There's no way one person's solving this thing. No. And it's probably not going to be 10 really smart people solving this thing with the issues that are, thrown at college football, right? What's legal and what's not legal at the end of the day when it goes to court. So that's going to be a real tricky situation. But I think what you're talking about, Damon, how different it is on signing day when the fans came to
the best.
But the problem is, haven't adapted and changed to the new reality of what's going on. First and foremost, the impact players are going to be these transfer portal players for next year. Mm-hmm. So everyone's trying to wrap their brain around, what is the real evaluation of those? That evaluation is still being made. Mm-hmm. It's almost like evaluators, the star rankers, the people who put stars on all these kids, they're not even sure who's going into the portal till the last minute. So it's hard to really get a hard, good evaluation look at them. And then when that happens, it's oh yeah, this is a good player. And somehow they throw star ratings out. I've seen that. It's are we talking about they're rated now as the 3-star or 4-star, or that's what they were in high school? It hasn't caught up.
No.
So I think those are going to be the impact difference makers in a big way. But the really good programs, and all programs, are still going to be built through the high school. It's just that's going to take longer. Those kids are going to be 2 years out, some of them 3 years out, if they will stay around.
Yeah.
And so it's just a different time. We just haven't adapted to this new signing period and what that looks like and how to celebrate it correctly.
Yeah, because everything just moves at a pace that you can't even hardly keep up with. Hey, last thing, Chris, for you here. I believe it was before the Oregon game. You've been super gracious in coming on the show and giving us so much of your time and your wisdom and your background. And thanks again for doing it today as we're getting ready for Christmas over the weekend and then the New Year's and everything else. But put your coaching and analyst hat on. You did this before the Oregon game, spot on, as you are every weekend doing this. Where will your eyes be in this matchup 11 days from now? The biggest keys, the biggest matchups, what you think heading into this game against Texas. What will be some of the defining aspects of whether or not the Huskies celebrate an unbelievable 13-1 season or get to 14-0 and go play for the Natty down in Houston?
Yeah, I think there's two things that jump out for me. And the first one is it's all about UW's offensive line versus Texas defensive line. And really in the pass game, UW has one of the best, if not the best, pass blocking offensive line in the country. And when I say that, I throw Penix in there because he's so good at not holding on to the ball. And, I think so many sacks are on the quarterback, just looking at things too long, and he will get that ball out, so he helps that. But we're just talking about pass blocking in general. We put that line is so good. Now, the strength of Texas's team is that defensive line, and in particular, stopping the run. Well, Washington, that's not really what they want to do anyways. They do want to run it. You got to have some sort of balance. But Texas is unbelievable. They're fourth in the country in stopping the run. And the last couple games that they played, Kansas State, who's a run-first team, ran the ball for 30 yards. Oklahoma State, who's a really they try to be balanced, but really they're not. They're a run-first team as well. They ran the ball a little bit better for 31 yards in the championship game. So, we got to keep them honest with that run game. But it's going to come down to, protecting Penix to throw the ball down the field with those, the receivers, the three receivers, tight ends. That's going to be fascinating. Can they give Penix enough time to throw that ball down the field? That I'm just so fascinated to watch.
So you're saying, Coach, your guys, Scott Huff, coaching that Husky offensive line, versus your guys, Pete Kwiatkowski and Jeff Choate, coaching that defensive front seven. It is your two guys you have on one phone and the other phone. They're all fighting for information. How cool, man. Those storylines, your guys, you are spot on. That is the storyline of this game. Coach Pete's assistant coaches playing on the big stage in the Sugar Bowl. Let's go.
I think there's one more thing that I what I really think too is I think this game's coming down to the wire. I think it's going to be, inside of 5 minutes and 4 minutes and 3 minutes, and then who can make the play. I think it's going to be that. And, I think our defense is so interesting and in a lot of ways maligned because I don't know if I've seen a defense that makes more plays when a play is truly needed than this defense. You can go ahead and compare the stats and all that, and the line for that. I mean, if this ever epitomizes stats are for losers, it's this defense. Because if they need to, get a turnover, if they need to get a fourth down stop, if they need to get a 3-and-out, game is on the line, they seem to come through almost every time. And it's the most interesting defense to, they just come through. That's all I say. So I cannot wait to watch this game.
Chris, what did I tell you on the driving range at Overlake? What did I tell you? I said, Chris, whatever happens in this matchup with Damon and I today, it's going to come down to the final hole. I mean, it always does.
You pulled out the miracle putt,
Stop.
which somebody is going to have to come with the play of the game. Is going to come in, probably inside those 3 minutes or something.
Who's going to make the 60-yard putt? Yep. Who's going to get it done? That will be the key. Chris, you are the absolute best. Damon and I appreciate you. We love you. I know the audience does as well. Have an awesome, awesome Christmas. We'll celebrate New Year's down there in New Orleans and hopefully have a blast and be talking to you about a national title game, man. Thank you, Coach.
Love it, guys. I really appreciate being on Heward's Happy Hour, where the Heward brothers are very happy talking about football at this hour.
Oh, yeah.
Enjoy. Happy holidays.
Yeah. Thank you.
The best.